Comments are probably lighting up on that. Hello, folks. Sorry about being muted. Okay.
Let's go back to the beginning, eh?
Sure.
All right.
Yeah.
Hello, folks. Welcome to Totally Tank, the Tankers podcast in Tankville. It's March 16th, 2024. And this is the episode 56. My name is Rob, and I'm joined by...
Hello, folks. I am John, and welcome to the Tank Tamer Dancer to Wayne's World, where every now and then we even remember to turn the microphone on. Okay, so the tank today is the Italian MBT, the C1 Ariete, the Ram. The answer to the question, quanto può essere difficile, or how hard can it be in badly pronounced Italian? Now, Rob, I'm going to get you to read out the names of the Patreons.
All right, so we have Brian Jenkins, Chris Pezet, Cornelius Weber, Ian McGuinness, Jonathan A. Markle, Maxi Mixed, and Per as our top tier patrons. Our other wonderful patrons who we love is all, Anton Gorbanoff, Carter Heller, Dan Sapienza, David Mulvaney, Fartmaster, Floaty Bird, Guy Hook, Hans Wang, Henry Hammereed, sorry, my bad pronunciations, Jay Beckman Strauss, Jamie Stokes, Jimmy O, Major Mansfield, Scotch 12, Spencer Davis, Steve Matthews, and Vikram Murthy.
Okay, folks. Now, if you want an excellent Totally Tank t-shirt, guaranteed to start conversations with terrifying people, or just really narky bar staff, but we'll get to that in the second half of the show. Head over to redbubble.com and search for Totally Tanked, and you want the ones that have got Totally Tanked written somewhere on them. Okay.
All right, time to get into the tank, boys and girls.
Mm-hmm. Now, one thing I find really interesting about the Ariete is that it's named after an Italian World War II armored division of the same name, which translates to Ram. You know, and the sort of ram you'd use to smash down a castle gate. So it's a cool name and it sounds cool and I like it. But Rob, why can't the Germans start naming vehicles after their World War II elite divisions?
Well, they've got the Panthers, don't they?
Yeah. So yeah, I mean the SS Adolf Hitler could get a bit weird, and the Hitler Jugend isn't going to go down too well. Totenkopf, though, you know, I mean a vehicle called the Death's Head, probably not going to go too well, is it?
Kaptelenkopf, isn't it? Potato Head.
Yeah. Whereas the Viking can probably go well.
Things.
Oh no, I've broken the teleprompter. All right, folks, just bear with me.
All right. All I was going to say is that, well, they did have a bit of a redemption arc because in 1943, the Ariete division was reformed as an Allied force and did help defend Rome from the Nazis. So they, as I said, did have a redemption arc. So I reckon they can keep the name.
So we're working on the post-1943 Arietes rather than the others. Okay.
All right, stats.
Yeah.
Manufacturer. In badly pronounced Italian, I'll make apologies for all this later. Consorzio Iveco Otto Melara, CIO. Now, John has got far more of an idea about all the various manufacturers and everything else. I just like the names. So one's Galileo, one's Leonardo.
So just to briefly try and get people across it, OTO Malera is actually the OTO. It doesn't mean like company in Italian, which I first did because you've got OTO Malera, OTO Breda. OTO is the parent company, and it comes from the Orlando Naval Armory.
We do need to be doing more things with our hands, don't we? Because we're talking Italians today.
It does make the green screen bleed through, though. Yeah, okay. So that's where Otto in company names comes from. If it's based out of the group that came out of the Orlando Naval Arsenal, that tends to be where that's coming from. Iveco is a consortium of like 5 different European automakers, kind of the second tier ones who knew they weren't going to make it on their own. It was formed in 1975. Iveco just stands for Industrial Vehicle Company, but they do own Fiat, so you'll often see Iveco and Fiat used quite interchangeably, and we'll probably do that as well, but that's just trying to give people some sense of what these company names mean and the tangled web of Italian military-industrial complex.
Yes, yeah. There you go. So the Ariete produced from 1994 to 2002. The first prototype was built in 1986, so they only built 200. 54 tons, 9.5 meters long, 3.6 meters wide, and 2.45 meters high. So pretty standard Western tank stuff there. Crew of 4, so loader, gunner, commander, driver. Armor, steel, and composites armor, but no one's saying what the details are. The main armament is the 120mm smoothbore Otto Breda L44. Now, not the smooth, which is shorter than the L45 and L55 used on most Western tanks. So it's got a shorter gun.
And it's one of those things that it was a pretty fine gun in the 1980s, but that stumpiness, 44 calibers is not enormous and is very much, everything's heading into the 50s these days, is part of why it's not really a competitive gun in the modern era.
It can't take
longer
because it carries,
penetrators are too short.
Yeah, penetrators are too short. It only carries 42 rounds, 15 ready rounds in the turret basket, with an additional 27 rounds in the hull rack. The hull
Everything in the fighting compartment.
Yep.
Bad.
And sitting right beside the driver, behind the lower front glasses. So you really better hope you hull down whenever you get into a fight.
The glasses that has no armor on it as well.
Well, we don't know. All right, it's got a coax MG42 plus an external MG42 for anti-air. So, and again, not even a remote weapon station or even a gun shield on that MG42. It's just out there, and you say, "Yep, good luck with that, Commander." Some instances of an M2 Browning 50 cal with a gun shield, I've seen photos of, but it might be just the new versions of the C2 coming out, or prototypes, or just thinking about what they're going to do with the C2. Engine. It does have a Fiat engine. It's a V12 diesel, 1270 horsepower engine, 4 forward gears, 2 reverse, torsion bar suspension, range of 600 kilometers, and maximum speed of 65 k's an hour. So it gets by having a smaller engine than the 1500 horsepower of most Western tanks, by being lighter by a long way. And as we were saying before, first off, just want to apologize to all the Italian folks who produced information about the Ariete. I saw there was a lot of info out there, but being Strian, I couldn't get a handle on the information that was being provided, and Google Translate could only do so much. In fact, when I got Google Translate to tell me Ariete tank on operations translated into Italian, I got lots of videos about steam mops.
Oh.
Yes, steam mops.
That could be the future.
Which is when I found out that tanks in Italian are called carro armato, or armed wagons. So I appreciate, which is why I was doing so badly with finding out information. And I also appreciated the daily battlefields videos on YouTube, as he was providing the information in both English and Italian. He'd do half and half, and I thought it was really good of him. So thank you to him. Just to throw in some other stats out, look, our English-speaking bias and what we've learned about what we've seen over Italy in however long, and the media we consume makes us laugh at Italy a bit undeservedly. And just want to throw out some stats just for people who don't know, because we have this idea about Italy, but we don't actually know what it is.
In high school, and a major purpose of our high school was churning out future military officers. The joke was always that, the Italian flag is a white cross on a white field. And that comes from things our grandparents told us coming out of World War II. And the reality with Italy is it probably doesn't have the sense of nationalism that other countries do. People in Italy are more regionally focused. They're Neapolitan or Florentine or Roman first, and their willingness to die for the national identity can be less than other groups, which in a lot of ways just makes them a bit smarter than some of us. But, All
right. So Italy has a population just under 60 million people and is the 8th largest or biggest economy in the world. So much bigger than a lot of other places. When you don't think about it, but they're right there after all the big names that you do think about.
It's the thing to remember is that we're constantly told about, scandals in Italy and Italian politics, but the country tends to pretty much run itself without the politicians getting too involved. And, obviously you can think of lots of major fashion brands, lots of, top of the line automotive brands. Italians are, it seems like a stupid thing to even have to say, but, they do a lot of very clever stuff. And this tank looks beautiful.
Yes, that's the main thing. That's one of the first things that everybody says about it. Says, that's a good looking tank. Anyway, they have their own arms industry. They build their own tanks. And now we'll talk about how well or badly they do that. Okay, so we all know about the Roman Empire, or at least think we know something about it. And those who know a little bit about Italy itself was that it was not formed as a country until 1861. later or earlier, depending on who you ask and which bits of Italy you include. But they celebrate the proclamation of Italy, the Kingdom of Italy, on the 17th of March, 1861.
Oh, tomorrow.
So happy birthday, happy 163rd birthday, Italy, for tomorrow. What's now known as National Unity, Constitution, Anthem, and Flag Day.
Oh, that was named by a committee, wasn't it?
So they're sharing that with the Irish. So it's. I wonder how many other countries share birthdays with other countries. So Australia's got India. We're both on the 26th of Jan.
Yep.
And yeah, so I wonder if there's a few others out there. All right.
Although we celebrate the day the British invaded, but anyway.
Well, it's the day that we've all agreed the British invaded. It's not the actual day, but look, it's the day we've started.
It's the day they lowered the flag or raised the flag. Okay. Yep. Keep going, Rob.
All right. During the Cold War, Italy had conscription. What a surprise! And operated M47s, M48s, M60s, then Leopard 1s. They were also, they built M60s and Leopards under license in Italy. Then in the late 70s, they tried to build their own version of the Leopard for tropical regions, which they were going to call the Lion. But the Germans pulled out of the plan. Italy went ahead and decided to build it themselves.
Rob, say it ain't so that the Germans messed up a international cooperation effort to design a tank. We often blame the French, but the Germans are the common denominator for every failed cooperative project.
We'll get to that. Anyway, so Italy went ahead and decided to build the OF40 MBT. Now, it looks so similar to a Leopard that the Germans turned up and started asking some questions about where Italy got the idea from. But once they had a closer look, that they realized that the OF40 had no Leopard proprietary technology in it. So, and it didn't work. That's why it didn't work very well.
Yeah.
All right. So they showed it around the world arms market between Thailand, Greece, Spain, Egypt, but ended up only building 39 and selling them to the United Arab Emirates from 1981 to 1985, where basically it became an orphan tank because everybody else was just using the Leopards and they weren't producing anymore. And so there's no spare parts or anything else for it. But luckily enough, it really was a bit interchangeable with Leopard bits and pieces. Having tried the handle of the Leopard 1, Italy then decided to go for a Western combination of the a bit of Challenger, a bit of Abrams, and a bit of Leopard 2. And so in 1986, the Ariete was unveiled as a prototype. It took a bit of time for them to get into production, as they did not enter service until 1994. The initial plan in 1992 was that they were going to build 200 of the C1 versions. This is the version we've got at the moment. And they always agreed that that was going to be the interim tank for the Ariete. And then they were going to build another 300 upgraded tanks, and they were going to call those the C2s. And they would be built later. And then from that, once they had the 300 C2s, they would then upgrade the initial 200 C1s to the C2 version. So you'd have 500 modern tanks available to Italy to do whatever they needed. However, Cold War ended. Guess what happened? Lots of cutting of
peace dividends,
cutting of military spending, ending conscription, and the question was asked: why do we need 500 tanks? So the initial 200 C1 Arietes were all that were built, and that was it. And that's where they got stuck.
I mean, well, we're going to talk about Centauro some more, but Centauro's the wheeled vehicle they've got that mounts a 105 gun, very similar
120
to
now.
The British L7. That's the Centauro too.
Mm-hmm.
I think Centauro was just so good in such a lighter package and got export success. I don't know this from any documentation, but it feels like they just said, you know what, Centauro is the way we want to go. And the C1's got some problems that can't be easily fixed, which we will get to. But it's an interesting one. It seems quite clear that the success of Centauro meant that the Italians are saying, do we even need a real MBT?
That's a question. All right, and for those who want to know, we are drinking Peroni Red. It's a red thing. I'm not sure if it's a different version of Peroni, because we got multiple versions of Peroni here. This is not the beer we're doing for beer review, but I would like to just show people that
it's in the tube, the Peroni Red,
yes,
which is much maltier than the VB we normally drink at this time of the day. But
that's
fine.
That is. It's a lovely little beer. I do enjoy it. Peroni.
Tell people more about the tanks, right?
Well, let's just say hello to some folks in the comments.
It's Alexander, Vlad, and Tasman. We love you both, guys.
And
no, that's a spammer on Twitch.
Oh, there you go.
We have got a huge number of people watching on Twitter, though, so I'm glad that bit's working.
Right.
We seem to have lost Facebook, unfortunately, for the Facebook folks. You'll have to catch us in other
Yeah.
ways. Yes. Okay, let's keep going with the tanks, Rob.
All right. When the time came to upgrade the tanks in 2002, the government decided the money could be better spent elsewhere. And so a tank designed in the 1980s, built in the 1990s, was forced to keep going until today. Whilst to watch older tanks, which include the Abrams and the Leopard 2 as older tanks, get upgraded again and again. And I'm pretty sure you could make a Thomas the Tank Engine story about this and saying little tank that just nobody loved it and nobody wanted to take care of it. But finally, its day was going to come. The only things close to an upgrade it got was extra armor kits. So it had the war kit, as they call it.
I mean, it's nice that a tank's got that as an option, isn't it? As an afterthought, but
Brandon makes stuff is here too. Thanks, Brandon. All right. Yeah, so having a war kit to place on it when it was, which is providing extra spaced armor on the front hull and the turret. The piece, I think it's the PSO kit. I'm assuming it means that the Peace Support Operations kit, which is providing extra composite armor screen on the sides and the hull of the hull. And then the anti-IED, anti-mine kit, which is, or the MPK, which was provided in 2015, which is providing extra armor on the bottom of the hull and basically mine protecting it. And from what I can tell, these kits are not supposed to be all deployed. No. Not supposed to be deployed all at the same time, as they weigh far too much. The war kit is when you want front towards enemy and are fighting other tanks at long range, which is the whole, which is what you want them for.
Mm-hmm.
The PSO kit is when you're slowly moving through a hostile urban environment and you're worried about attacks from the ambushes from the side or RPGs or whatever else. And the IED mine kit is for when the engineers don't like you very much. And so you've got to take care of where you're driving as you go.
Yeah. Look, I think it's worth just touching on, it's very clear from the documentation, although multiple sources seem to be quoting the same unnamed source, which is a little nerve-wracking. The engine, which was done by mating two Centauro engines together, so two V6 engines into a V12. Weirdly, that engine throws out 500 horsepower. Two of them you would think would get you 1,000. For some reason, they thought that the pairing could get them to 1,400 horsepower. And that basically never eventuated, and they've had huge problems having to rev the crap out of the engines to get a decent power output, which is meant for much shorter maintenance lives, or much greater maintenance times being required. And also, one does wonder if the shortage of armor on the tank has something to do with the fact they just can't afford the weight with the crappy Iveco / Fiat Franken engine because in the history of tank engines, mating two engines together instead of designing a good one from scratch for the appropriate size, it's a shortcut that,
Well, what did old mate Mr. Ferrari say about Lamborghinis? They're only good for tractors. So why couldn't they get a Lamborghini engine in there?
Well, Lamborghini do make some huge tractors. Anyone who's watched Clarkson's Farm, if you want to see a Lamborghini tractor.
Really? Okay.
That's too big for the British countryside. But that's,
all right. Hello to Brett Parker and Half-Life APC as well.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for coming along, guys.
Yep.
As the years went by, Italy kept thinking about what to do with the Ariete. Did they upgrade? Did they buy someone else's tanks? And if so, how many? They supposedly looked at Abrams. They looked at Macavers. And they had a bit of a cheeky squint at Challenger 2s.
A cheeky squint. Look at the thing. It looks like a Challenger.
No. They're looking at what they were going to buy instead of these.
No, I get that, but it is a, literally when we did the What's the March tank competition, everyone's like, oh, it's a Challenger, because that wedge shape on the front of the turret, it sure looks a lot like a Challenger 2 in silhouette.
But they couldn't come to a decision as to would they upgrade or would they buy somebody else's tank. So finally, in August 2019, a decision was made. They were going to upgrade 90 Ariete tanks to the C2 version with the option of upgrading another 35. So 125 of the 200 Ariete tanks would be then upgraded to the C2 version. 20-something years after they were supposed to be done.
Just briefly, the C2 version, they're going to have an upgraded engine by taking the engine design they've got and lengthening the strokes to increase the displacement. So I really question whether they'd be better off going with a clean sheet, but that's where they're going. So
All right, with the first ones coming to service in 2025 after the upgrade service upgrade. And at the same time, the Italian Army is also buying 132 Leopard 2s, A8s. So I don't even know A8s was in production yet.
Yeah,
but
well, that's a very new Leopard 2, which is the only sort you'd really want to buy. That's not true. I mean, you'd buy them from surplus at a really good price for older ones. But yeah, if you're buying new, then the A8 would be where you'd want to go.
Yep. So 132 Leopard 2s plus 140 other support tanks, Leopard support tanks. And they're going to be coming to service from 2027 to 2037. So they've got the next 15 years locked up there. And that's, you got to ask, there's some questions there. Upgrades. The C2 upgrades. So yes, they're getting up to a 1,500 horsepower engine. It's about time. But yeah, I didn't actually understand the bits about lengthening the things, and so yeah, that's going to make a bit of a mess.
I mean, sure, engine design gets really weird with the stroke lengths. Short strokes can give you quite a lot of power for a lower displacement, so it's not linear. But we are in no way positioned to even speculate, much as we enjoy speculation, as to exactly what the engine will come out with. Alan has joined us, noting the old Italian joke: 2 forward gears, 7 reverse.
Yep.
I believe it's 4 forward, 2 reverse.
Yes.
On area. One big problem with this C1, as opposed to C2, is that the thermal imager is gunner only.
Well, the commander can see through it at any rate, so he doesn't have his own.
Yeah, in a modern tank, you really do need the commander having their own thermal imager. But this is really a 1980s design that's just still here for some reason.
Sorry, Alexander Vlad's the six disc CD changer. Yes, has made me laugh because yes, I remember having one of those in the car.
I bought a car with a 6-disc CD changer, and I never once used it. And it just sat there for 5 or 6 years. I owned the car. Yeah.
All right. They're going to a 120mm L45 gun, so they will finally be able to, which is what they're using in the Centauro 2, and it means they can then use all NATO ammunition and not just the older shorter rounds that fit in the L44.
There you go. That's fine.
Don't break it.
That's good.
Yeah.
Sorry, Rob's just worried about the teleprompter. Just quickly, Otto Malera doing the turret design, and there's a reason why. And for those on the live feed, I've got a naval gun, the 76. It is at the moment, I believe, the most produced turret and gun in the world. There's over 1,000 in service. Otto Malera really know what they're doing. Every navy in the world that has a choice, if they're aiming for something in the 76mm range, which is a little light, it's around 3 inches for naval armament. So for smallish frigates and corvettes and the like, they just go straight to Otto Malera. They don't mess around with thinking about anyone else. So I'm going to infer from that it's pretty good. Either that or they pay amazing bribes.
It's good lunches.
Maybe a bit of both. It's good enough that everyone goes with it. But the problem you've got is saying, oh, well, they make turrets for ships. Why can't they make turrets for tanks? Is that, the turret on a ship is a tiny part of the system, and the turret on a tank is almost the whole ship. Certainly the superstructure, the whole superstructure of the ship. So there is a bit of an issue that a tank turret is a much more complicated thing than the naval gun on a corvette. And I think that might have fed into some of the problems that they've had with this design, and that they didn't know quite as much as they might have thought they did.
Well, that's a good point about talking about the Navy stuff, because Italy, probably a little bit similar to Australia, is more focused on its Air Force and Navy, because being a peninsula, it's with a very well-defended northern connection to the continent, which is basically lots of great big huge mountains with very narrow passes, is much more focused on the Navy and Air Force rather than their army. So
if you haven't traveled through the Italian Alps, I'd say go and do it. It's amazing. But I can remember waking up on a train that had left Venice and was going to Vienna, and seeing the Alps go past, and just the surreal nature of these enormous vertical cliff faces. And I literally asked the people in the cabin, "Is this real?" It was so fantastic to look at. So they're no fooling, those mountain passes. There's a reason we still talk about Hannibal getting elephants over them 2,500 years later. So yeah, and you look at World War II. The Allies didn't invade Italy over land; they invaded them by sea.
Yeah, and they forced the Germans to basically bring forces in over those mountains. That's why they went in there, to increase the Germans' logistic footprint by making them come down to Italy, where their trains didn't connect as well.
Yeah,
as east, north, south rather than east, west.
All right, moving on, Rob. What do you got next?
Still back on the improvements of the C2 that they're going to be building. Possibly have some prototypes out. They'll also get new tracks in the transmission, hopefully to be able to handle the increased weight of the C2. Updated optics and fire control system for the commander and the gunner.
Hey.
Yep. Basically, they want to try and get it out there and actually make it applicable in today's day and age. An electric turret driving instead of a leaky flammable hydraulic system.
It is funny because we kind of touched on this last episode, and we'll get back to some more of the feedback we've had on that. When the successor tank specifically fixes some things, that's how you can tell for sure that there was an issue with the thing in the previous version. Yeah.
Harriers? Okay, anyway. I'm interested in what some people are saying in the comments. All right. And new radios and integrated battlefield communication systems. I mean, they know what they're doing with radios. They're Italians.
Not being reverse racist in any way.
They invented the stupid things, all right? Along with somebody else. But anyway, the point being is that they have a very well developed arms industry and electronics and everything else. And so, look, why they've got all the bits and pieces. I just need take the time and effort to actually spend the money and actually upgrade these tanks. I mean, yes, they're a bit light on and the engine's a bit weak and so forth, but they've still got them. So, yeah.
Look, I mean, many people call it the worst tank in NATO.
Yes. That's because Arjun's not in NATO.
It was their first effort. You've always got to forgive a country. And I know that they built tanks in World War II, but there was a significant interregnum. It was really a return to tank building.
But no, anyway, look, Centauro 2. All right, it's their 8-wheeled tank destroyer essentially. It looks good and has all the new bits that they want to put on the C2 Ariete. So they've already proven the upgrade. So the 120 mil L45 gun, the fire control systems and the electronics and the turret, and they've even got an autoloader in the Centauro 2. So that's one of the things they wanted to do with the C2 is put an autoloader in there. They're probably not going to do it this time, but that was back when they were looking at the upgrades in the late 90s and saying this is what they wanted to get an autoloader into the tank. And look, having said that, what we were saying before is, yes, it's a poor tank, but still they built it themselves. Centauro 2 is pretty good. And what do they actually need for? All right.
Well, this is where Centauro just kind of crapped all over Ariete in that you can wheel it on and off your planes. You can get a bunch of them where they're going. They need much less maintenance hours. They still give you a stonking great gun that, it's a very interesting question, the usefulness of the 105 on the modern battlefield. A lot of people, including the Americans, are placing some bets that it's still pretty useful.
Well, I mean, Centauro 2 is the only wheeled vehicle that has a 120 mil gun on it. It's got a very good recoil system to allow it to fire the bigger rounds and not knock the vehicle over sideways when it fires from side. When the turret's skewed to the side and firing, and not actually knocking it at flying.
I mean, Centauro has, literally big debates in countries like Britain saying, do we actually need tracked tanks? Would we be better off going with something like Centauro? The Americans built the Striker MGS, but inspired by Centauro, although they, just going to show this stuff isn't easy. That was a complete disaster of a vehicle. So, there's some lessons to be learned from everyone there. Anyway, sorry, continue.
Right. So the Centauro 2 has got the L45. It's got an autoloader. They've got a remote weapon station, which the they haven't got on the Ariete yet. So you kind of be saying, okay, we've already developed a remote weapon station for the Centauro 2. Why are we not putting that onto the C2? So that'll probably come. We don't know. And it's already got the IED and anti-mine kits installed on the Centauro 2. So again, you think all these things would be coming for the C2 as part of its upgrade, because Italy's already proven that they can actually do it and install it on another armed vehicle. All right, so they've been they've upgraded 150 of their 450 Centauros since 2018. And look, that's where we get back to and you're asking the question, does Italy need an armoured brigade or division, or are medium divisions more useful and flexible? A combination of Centauro 2's Dardos, which is their infantry fighting vehicles.
Yep.
Carrier 6 has a 25 mil autocannon on it, and the Ariete as the heavy hand of the tank. So rather than having just tanks, do they have a combination of them and have more flexible division of their tanks and brigades and armored brigades?
I think it's a really interesting one. I was trying to figure this out for myself today. If your infantry fighting vehicles are tracked, then that gives you a lot more reason to keep your tanks tracked. But if your infantry fighting vehicles are wheeled, say something like Boxer, then moving to your gun system being wheeled as well makes sense, because there's no quicker way to lose a tank company than to send it off on its own ahead of its support and logistics.
Yeah, you don't send tanks without infantry, and you don't send infantry without tanks.
But you also need to be able to get the maintenance crews and the fuel up to where the tanks are. So their organic sustainment is pretty low. And at that point you start looking at the wheeled vehicles a little more sensibly.
Well, I mean, even the French are looking at these combination medium brigades of having more wheeled vehicles rather than having Leclerc's as a single. But then again, the French have probably got more dedication towards the idea of having punching above their weight and saying, yep, we've got a lot more responsibility around the world to go and clean up our messes from our colonial days. The Italians still do that. I mean, don't forget they had their own colonies around the world, and they were just a bit like the Germans. They were a bit later to the game, but they still had them, and were throwing their weight around in those places and feel a connection and responsibility for cleaning up the messes in those various countries.
Or more to the point, creating more messes to make more money. But it's There's a really good movie called The Cruelest Day about the Italian ongoing involvements in places like Ethiopia, where they build roads to nowhere that they're actually using to dump their toxic waste under the roads, and then murdering the journalists who go and look into it. It's
that sounds lovely, John. Nice, relaxing something to watch for the kids.
We're a tech podcast. We don't have to be sweetness and light.
But it's useful. So I hadn't heard it, very, very useful to know that. Anyway, lightweight. Allows the Ariete to cross a lot more bridges, which Italy has a lot of, and any that weren't destroyed in the war probably pretty old and won't carry a 70-ton tank. So,
well, certainly the bridges that were literally built by the Romans, of which there are many.
What have the Romans ever done for us? Eh?
Well, they weren't thinking about 70-ton tanks.
Bet they would love to have been, though. They would have loved.
Imagine you're a Roman engineer going, "Oh, how tough we're going to build it." It's got to at least take a turnip cart. Maybe 1,000 men walking over it in step. And then someone's like, "Oh, can we get this 70-ton tank over it?"
All right. So yes, having a lighter tank is probably good for Italy itself. Whether or not that's and then all the places that they're probably sending these tanks as well is probably quite useful. They want a tank of their own because weapon systems strategically critical. You want to depend on foreign supplies as little as possible, as lots of places are finding out, saying, "Oh, can you look? We've run out of these things. Can you build us some more?" And the other country that you might have bought it from 20 years ago said, "Oh no, that industry's moved on. The factory's shut down. You can't have any more of those." But we're in a war. We need those things, and so well. Sucks to be you. So it's one of those things of if you want to have strategic systems, you want to be able to control those and not be reliant upon other countries to provide them for you.
Yeah, I think there's just a huge point that's come out of the war in Ukraine as well, that the idea that in a moment of crisis, you can buy on the world market. The problem is that in a moment of crisis, the rest of the world's like, oh, geez, no, we're gonna keep these for ourselves.
Yeah, just in case.
Yeah,
we've got to hang on to ours, even though we're not using them. We don't expect to use them for the next 20 years, but we're going to hang on to them just in case.
Yeah, I mean, the thousands of Abrams in storage in the US while Ukraine's trying to make do with 15 or 30. Yeah. Moving on. We'll get to that in the second half. We've got a lot to say about Ukraine.
All right. Moreover, the defense industry in Italy is big. It's big, and there's a chance to export MBTs and other arms is an important point for any country's bottom line of getting the dollars in and paying for your own tanks is to sell them to somebody else. It's just like Centauro 2's going to Brazil at the moment. All right. Now, there's something to be said that the C1 version was pretty good when it came in. In the terms, fire control system was very advanced for the 90s, and everyone else just surpassed them. So was it a good tank for the 90s that just got left behind on the upgrade heap?
Well, I think the engine problems say no, and the armor problems that came from the engine problems, or appear to have come from the engine problems, still says no. It was not a great tank, but its lack of upgrades have definitely made it comparatively worse and worse as the years have gone on.
Yeah. I mean, and another question is, why bother with the upgrades when Italy is buying a bunch of Leopard 2s?
Well, because when you let manufacturing capability go, it takes 40 years to rebuild it.
Yeah.
But if you can't find any export buyers for it, you do have to ask, how much support to local industry should we be giving versus just buying something decent that'll be here next year from overseas. But that then comes down to the whole, you can't be placeholder forces, which, a force of 200 tanks placeholder force. The Australian tank force, you could argue, very much is a placeholder force.
I mean, we look at Italy's 200 tanks and go, oh, that'd be nice.
Yeah. But somewhere around 100 to 300 is your placeholder force, where you can at least still be training with the things and learning all the lessons you need to learn. And if you have less than that, less than 100 at least, then you're really letting the capability go, and it will take a long time to rebuild that.
Yeah, and if you're not building them yourself, it's case you're not going to be getting that industry anytime soon. So, all right, so there's lots of speculation on how weak the armor is when it's 20 tons lighter than the Abrams. Now,
there's a lot of speculation that the composite armor, which is like the Challenger and Abrams, is an Italian homebrew that has never been put to the test, and whether it is as good as Chobham or Dorchester, or there's a new one that I can't remember the name of. It's a case of we just don't know. But until someone actually shoots at it, I would take it with a grain of salt as to whether it is anywhere near as good as. Yeah.
But what's surprising is the lack of information on the Ariete army abilities that no one's leaked on War Thunder. All right.
Do Italians play War Thunder?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. There's even a site. I tried to get in and get the moderator who's Italian to provide me some better links to get information about it that might be in Italian and English. But unfortunately, he didn't get back to me in time, and it was all my fault. So anyway, it was. But they have their own forum there for Italian tanks. Anyway, but nobody's linked the armor on the armor details.
I mean, come on
the
War Thunder, people, link the damn stuff
in order to get better stats for the tank in game. There is plenty of discussion on the War Thunder forums if it should be better or is too good for what it is in actual reality. So the game is better, is providing the armor is better, or the armor should be better. And so, but then again, maybe War Thunder has just said, look, guys, we don't want any more state secrets published in our forums, so they're just probably cutting down on them a little bit harder. Or maybe they were in Italian and I just didn't see them.
Yeah, I mean, it's unbelievably problematic for any website when they've got sensitive information being posted on them, and this is a place I have been in my past. And providing the server logs and even deciding if you're going to provide the server logs, if you're going to wait for a warrant. If they get a warrant, they're probably going to take your servers away. It's all extremely unpleasant. If I was War Thunder, I would not want that stuff being leaked. For all that, it has certainly given the game a lot of publicity.
All right, so here are some of the posts on War Thunder. So the Ariete war kit and Ariete PSO armor is too weak. I do not really think this is historically. Could you please check the possibilities of the armor? These two tanks can be improved.
See, this is one of my favorite things on game forums is there's someone who's just a raging fan who can't believe that the thing they're such a fan of is not rated more highly by everyone else.
Yeah. One more question. Is it possible that the Italian army can receive a BR-11 level tank? Maybe the PSO and the war kits can be added on into one tank. It's got to and making it even better. So yeah, again, they want stuff, and they
want a 20-ton heavier tank and a tank that has a crap engine. Yeah,
but they want the one that looks good.
It's going to make.
They want the one that looks good.
It's going to make a great pillbox. It'll be Chieftain, the best tank in the world, if it breaks down where you have to fight.
Yeah, the Chieftain probably had a better gun. Anyway, all right. All right. So one of the big things is when you're looking at the tank on the screen and any sort of image you see it's got a really big lower front glasses compared to any other modern tanks, right? Which is much lower down. So
which has no armor on it.
Yeah. So they better hope they are hull down whenever they get into any sort of activity, because that front, right behind that front lower front glasses is where the ammo is stored. And so those 27 rounds, get anything near them, is just going to go boom. Yeah, you don't really want that. All right. Now, the other one to round it all out, supposedly Italy has joined with the MGCS program with
Main Ground Combat System.
Yeah, with France and Germany. So it's a question of will they actually contribute anything, or will they just go back to building a licensed version of a successful tank when it comes out, if a successful tank ever comes out of that program? But the main thing is, like you were saying for our Challenger or Chieftain episode, the main reason the Brits want to have a tank building capability is so they can be part of any other European program that goes forward in the future and say, yes, we are building our own tanks, therefore we are allowed, we meet the criteria for being part of your program. And so maybe the Italians are in that space themselves with the Ariete, saying
tier 1 partnership is super important. Yeah. I mean, so let's face it, Challenger 3 is they're literally just upgrading the existing tanks. They're not building any new hulls. But anyway, that's a different tank. Let's move on.
All right, so these are questions. I mean, the Ariete, it could have been good. Yeah. Anyway, all right.
We've said before, and we'll say again: a tank with a bad engine is a bad tank. The engine is the lifeblood of the tank, and it's not a good engine, and that has crippled all sorts of things with the tanks. And it seems quite clear to me from the way that they've ignored its upgrade history that the Italians have not been well pleased with it.
Well, obviously they weren't going to the right lunches. Anyway, variants.
Nope.
Nil. Right? There's just the 200 C1s. That's it. There are no bridge layers. There are no recovery vehicles. There are no any of those. I'm assuming they just used all the Leopard versions that they've got from the 80s and just doing it from there. Operational history. All right. This is another area where not speaking Italian has hampered me a bit in this regard, as the units operating the Ariete listed as having been deployed to Bosnia, Kosovo, Afghanistan, Lebanon, and Iraq. But I can only find photos of the Ariete in Iraq, and not even in the one main battle that the brigade, the armored brigade, was involved in Nasiriyah in Iraq in April of 2003, when only the brigade's Centauro 1s were deployed and not the Ariete. The tanks were then deployed later to Iraq in 2005, 2006. It's speculated that their limited use to static defense only was as the extra PSO armor kits would put too much stress on the engine and transmission. So they said, right, we've got them here, but they can't go anywhere, because if you drive them around too much, they're going to break down, and that would just be embarrassing. So we're just going to have them fitted for, but not have them, but not use them.
Look, at that period, the Black Hawk Down scenario was something that everyone had in their minds. And there comes a point when your rescue mission is completely bogged down and you got to have some armor that you can send down the road. Because if you keep sending up armored Humvees, Eric Banner's going to play one of you guys in a movie. Sometimes you're just going to need the armor, and in the case of Black Hawk Down, it was literally Pakistan provided. I think it was M60s to rescue them in the end. And
M113s, so something like that. Basically, the mountain armored brigade or something was that was spaced. Anyway, it's been a while since I've read anything about that. Yeah, Operation Ancient Babylon. That's right, Tasman. It was. It was a good name for an operation in Iraq.
Is it?
Is it? Yes.
Keep going.
All right. All right. So there wasn't a lot. I mean, they had them there in Iraq, but they don't list them. I mean, there's no list of activities for what they've done. Again, this could just be my inability to access Italian language reports on what they actually did there. But as far as I know, they were there. They went out and exercised. They blew stuff up in training, but didn't actually get involved in any enemy activities. So,
also, if you're worried that the PSO armor will be too much stress on the engine and transmission, try putting the other kit on as well. To our War Thunder forum fans, it'd be kind of cool if there was a tank you could take in War Thunder, but it just broke down. The engine exploded the second you'd gunned it.
Yeah, no, Tasman's noted that they will need to replace their Dardo IFVs sometime soon. It's correct, and they were built in the 80s. So at least they've got them. They're not bad, but they made the step of getting away from the M113s, unlike Australia, who is still using our M113s from.
We spent a fortune upgrading them all.
Yeah,
and lengthening the chassis. Simple thing.
So Italy went from the M113s in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and said, right, we got to get something else, and that's when they built the Dardos. And Australia decided, no, you know what, we're just going to hang on to those because we can't be bothered. Anyway, so.
We've got beautiful new IFVs coming, Rob. As soon as we finish building them in the Minister for Defence's electorate.
And how many of them are we going to get?
A third of what we thought we were.
And how many M113s are we still going to have in service after that?
Oh, well, they're a useful truck.
Even the Ukrainians love them.
Yeah. They don't love them, but they're like, it works and it gets us around.
And everybody can, and any mechanic who's worked on a heavy diesel engine knows how to fix it because it's just a heavy diesel engine. Yeah. There's nothing special about it. Yeah. Anyway, so operators, guess what? Italy, that's it. They have two regiments in the armored brigade, the Ariete brigade, and one regiment in the mechanized infantry brigade, which is the Garibaldi brigade. Each regiment is made up of 41 tanks, 3 companies of 13, so 3 platoons of 4, 1 for the company commander. That's your 13. And then for the 41, it's got your 3 companies of 13 plus 1 for the battalion commander and 1 for the regimental commander. So yes, that's a single battalion of tanks in a single regiment of tanks, and both commanders get their own tanks. Now, I'm sure it makes sense to tankers, but I didn't get it. While you had a battalion commander and a regimental commander, so basically a lieutenant colonel and a colonel getting their own tanks, even though anyway. But I'm sure it makes sense to them. Great, good. I don't understand any of it all. So that's 123 of your 200 tanks. The remaining tanks are at the cavalry school, which is where they teach people how to drive them and use them and shoot them and everything else. And the transport school, I broke it again.
That's okay.
Oh, no, do it. At the transport school and transport material school, which is where you learn how to move the tanks, driving them around on low loaders around the countryside and over the various bridges, and or undergoing refurbishment, because every once in a while you've got to take your tank out of service and put it through a level 3 or whatever levels you want to talk about it, a servicing program to make sure everything was working in it, replace the bits and pieces and make it what's his name? Not Ulysses. Whose boat is it?
Theseus, the ship of Theseus.
The ship of Theseus. There you go. That's the sort of thing. Yeah.
Now, it comes back to, if you want to be able to have a deployable force of, say, 41 tanks, you then need the other 150, 200 to be cycling them in and out of service and heavy overhaul and training and all the other things. It takes a lot to get the deployable force, and this is why people with finance degrees who talk about needing to make more tip to tail and that sort of thing are often overlooking a lot of really important steps in the process. But then you also the really key thing for modern tanks is how good are your simulators, and I have no idea how good Italian simulators are.
Do great simulators.
Maybe
they might upgun the engine a bit in their simulators.
Yeah,
because they really want them to go brum brum and go really faster.
There's one thing Americans are good at, it's software, and I would be willing to bet the American simulators for the Abrams are significantly better, and that's something we don't talk about enough.
All right. However, the Ariete does not make an appearance in Girls und Panzer. I know. Senchado allows only tanks whose design was completed till August 1945.
Imagine being such an outdated tank, but still not qualifying for Girls and Panzer. It would be.
But don't worry, John. It does have a snorkel and can weigh it up to 5 meters when repaired.
If it's got the full NBC treatment, though. And very few tanks these days have got the full NBC treatment. Anyway, that's it. In a theoretical 5 meter snorkeling, which not only would the tank need to be prepared, we've talked about this before, but you would have had to have pioneers scout the riverbed.
We've talked about that many times, but it does do it. Yeah, and there you go. All right. Do we have a poll?
Yeah, we've got a poll going.
I haven't seen the poll.
Oh, the poll is it?
I would have voted on the poll. Where's show me the poll, John?
Okay, well.
It's on Facebook, and is it broken?
It's on YouTube, and it's working on YouTube. It's is it a Fiat or a Ferrari? And,
there you go. It's 80% for the Fiat.
Yes. Yes, which given that it's literally built by Iveco, who own Fiat.
If only it can be a Lamborghini,
not a hard thing. Obviously Lamborghini don't want to get involved in that sort of thing. But anyway, I'm just amazed that 20% of viewers have gone with Ferrari, but a lot of people have low opinions of Ferrari, so he didn't really qualify that sufficiently. All
right, so from here, folks, we might go into our. How do we want to sum up the Ariete, John? I think it was a good tank for the 90s, and just.
I think it was a good tank for the 80s, but even in the 80s, you still had the problem that it was underpowered because the engine has never delivered what it should have because it was a flawed design concept to begin with. That led to a lack of armor, which is a big follow-up problem. The gun is underpowered, and the electronic systems have not been upgraded, which leaves you with. There is a reason people are calling it the worst tank in NATO, and I do take. Tasman made a point that some of the really old Leopards have some really big problems as well,
and that Romania's in NATO, and therefore the TR-85 is part of.
We can make that argument as well. That's fair enough too. If the engine had been right, then everything else could have followed in better ways, and maybe they could have actually got some export wins, because Lord knows Malera can convince any country in the world to put their turret and gun on their frigates and corvettes.
Now, here's a point for you.
Mm-hmm.
Because it was not required in the last 30 years, did the Italian government make the right choice of cost benefit analysis and say, you know what, we can get by without it, and now we're going to upgrade it, but we haven't had to do that for the last 25 years, and so we've saved all that money.
Like
can they say that?
It's like a dreadnought holiday. And, anytime your country takes a holiday from an aspect of warfighting and doesn't have to use it in that time, you can make the argument that was well calculated, but then you have to weigh that up over what it's going to cost them to rebuild the capability when they do need it, and if they can have it rebuilt in time. And
well, they've shown with the Centauro 2s, and the Centauros and Centauro 2s, they have the capability. And so, and they've maintained an arms industry. That's a very important thing, is that they've actually got an arms industry, that they're not abandoning it and saying, yep, we're not going to do any sort of heavy vehicle development and design and production. And they've got that.
Between Malero and Breda, they can definitely make heavy armaments, and no question. I think we touched on this earlier. The Ariete's biggest problem was that the Centauro was such a good design. that it got Italy thinking about why are we even bothering with tracked fighting vehicles, which is a live question for a lot of militaries. Although I think what people are seeing coming out of Ukraine is that no, it's how many hundreds of MBTs you've got that is really important, and tubes of heavy artillery.
Well, I mean, it depends on your strategic position. I mean, Italy is not Ukraine. You're not seeing T-72s and T-90s coming over the Alps. You have nice wide open plains coming in from Russia to Ukraine.
Yeah, you build a tank for high intensity warfare. That's what it's for. Because literally you've got Centauro for the lower intensity stuff.
Yeah.
It's Ariete is not a great tank. The main problem in my view is that the engine let it down. And I guess that's where I just come down to it. And Centauro was so good that Italy's focus really went on Centauro.
Yeah, I agree. But still, you look at the tank that's on the screen now, it's a good-looking tank.
Well, no one ever said it wasn't good-looking. And particularly where the engine bay rises up to meet the cutout of the turret bustle, that's just aesthetically beautiful. And it doesn't need to be anything else. Now, we're going to do the halftime chat, which is our interview with John Holman from the New South Wales Lancers Museum, which is an interesting bit of Australian armoured history, and also covering what you can see and do at the museum, which has running tanks in the middle of Sydney. It's quite bizarre. And
the middle of Parramatta.
We're going with this. So Rughouse come in saying he voted Ferrari because Ferrari's a crap. I thought we had a few of those. I know a left-wing political party that polled its members on same-sex marriage and was alarmed that 10% came back saying they were opposed to it. And they had to dig a little deeper and found out that 10% were opposed to marriage in general. And not the same-sex side of things.
Now,
yes.
In the interview, John does wander away for a little bit, but we does come back, and I think it's a pretty good interview overall.
Yeah, no, it's a good interview. We'll talk about it when we come back, but it was beset by everyone had technical. All three people involved have technical difficulties while it was unfolding, and I also had COVID. So anyway, it's coming up, and I hope you enjoy it. And in half an hour, we'll be back. We'll be talking about challenges in Ukraine. We'll be talking about the new North Korean tank. We'll be talking about Abrams getting destroyed in Ukraine. Rob, what else have we got?
Some shout outs to the Korawa swim-in and my run-in with the Australian Chief of Defence Force.
Yeah, Rob's famous now.
Okay. I've always been famous.
Yeah, well, that's true. Okay, let's get this video going, and we will be back live with you folks in around 30 minutes. No, I cut my mouse to stop mousing. This is cool.
Have you tried turning it off and on again?
All right, well, you have to entertain the masses.
Well, so there it was. No shit. Thought I was about to die. No, that's a traditional Australian opening for any sort of discussion about in the military. For those who don't know, it's how you start a bit of a tall story, or it might even be a true story, but that's how you usually start it. So I'll cover it off now. So I was at a fancy do the other week as a +1, and across the other side of the room was the Chief of the Australian Defence Force, General Angus Campbell. And we got to talking because there was another guy on the table who's very much into tanks, and so he and I were talking about the podcast. And after a few ales, there was a bit of nudging, and the discussion around the table was, go on, Rob, go and have a chat with him. Now, strangely enough, he was actually there as a +1 himself. So it wasn't his do. It wasn't. It was his wife's do. It was about for a wildlife cause. So he was a +1. I was a +1. I thought, all right, this is a good chance to go over and have a chat with him. So I got an introduction from somebody else who's there and involved with him in other capacities, and went and had a lovely chat, but hadn't had enough amber ales to be able to say, mate, I've got a podcast about tanks. Would you like to be on it? Didn't happen. All right. Now, I've got to say, for the Ariete, the number of times I saw the Italians productions actually had the chief of army talking on their podcast, and they're going, wow, they're really trying to push these guys. And so I only saw that this week, whereas the dinner happened a couple of weeks ago. So there I was with Angus having a bit of a chat. It was lovely. He was a very nice man. Probably a bit more serious than we are, and wasn't drinking at the function like the rest of us were. So next time, didn't invite him on the podcast. Did meet some folks who are involved with the Cora Swim-In, which I'll give out a shout out to later. But next time I run into Angus, I've got some other anecdotes to share with him, and maybe I'll throw out an invite and see how we go. How we doing, John?
So the USB bus on this computer has completely shut itself, and a reboot is the only thing that's going to fix it. So what we're going to do, everyone, just hang on. Don't
panic.
Either we've got most people either on our Twitter or YouTube. We're probably going to have to create a new stream. And that's what we are going to create. So I'm going to have to take the whole computer down and bring it back up, and then we'll say hello to everyone when we get the new thing going, and then we'll get the video going, and we will
cut to halftime. Then
be back. Then we will go to the halftime. So just bear with us. Look for us on whatever channel you're currently viewing us on. There'll be a new stream starting in a second. Hey,
yay.
Okay, all right. Well, Brett can see us. That's the important thing.
Somebody came back to us.
So we'll,
thanks, guys.
Okay, we will put on the video. We won't, because I'm going to need to reload that. Okay, just bear with me. Rob, keep talking.
All right, so there we were. No shit, thought we were about to die. So at the same dinner, I met some folks from what's called the Cora Swim-In. So this is a meeting of people who have restored extra military vehicles around Australia, and they're having their big weekend this weekend. So they have an annual meetup in town Cora. They provide, they have armored vehicles, Jeeps, four-wheel drives, so Land Rovers, Bren gun carriers and universal carriers, trucks, mogs, all sorts of various different restored military vehicles, and they have a gather together on the in Australia in Corowa, and have a big parade expo day. They do a swap meet, so anybody needs do you need an O-ring gasket for a such and such, and I look after that, and they go around and do a number of parades in the local town, schools and local area. And just basically have a bit of the thing. So I just wanted to say a shout out to them and say hope they're having a great weekend of it. It's beautiful weather here in Australia today after a stinging hot week. We've finally got a bit of a cool change come through. The other one I want to throw in. Oh, sorry, I'm going to throw to John just in case he's got something to tell us.
No, I'm just going to say we're ready for the halftime video. So,
all right, let's go to that, because otherwise I was going to have to say, please don't spoil the rugby scores for us, because we know the Brumbies are playing in the Highlands.
Don't tell them that. Okay, all right. We're going to go to the video. That was a very exciting technical error. I can't quite believe we pulled back so well, and let's keep going. So joining us today is John Howell from the New South Wales Lancers Memorial Museum. I hope I've got that right. And John, the New South Wales Lancers are a really interesting institution in that they're a regiment of the Australian Army, a reserve regiment, and they're older than both the Australian Army by a significant margin and Australia itself, I believe. Can you tell us a little bit about the history of the regiment before we get more into the museum?
Yes, the regiment was formed toward the end of 1884, actually gazetted in February 1885 as part of the New South Wales Military Forces, which basically means the New South Wales Army. They were initially called a light horse regiment, but light horse at that point were basically sword-mounted cavalry. They became Lancers after Richardson, the commander of the New South Wales military force, came back from the Sudan, where he'd been impressed by the showing of the British Lancer regiments with their pretty pennants of the Polish flag upside down. He converted the Sydney squadron of what was called the New South Wales Cavalry Reserves into Lancers. Initially, they paraded with fishing rods, but they obtained bamboo Lancers from India, and Lancers have been made from a number of things, and the traditional red and white pennants that were used by the British Army Lancer regiments, and are still used by the QRL, Queen's Royal Lancers, the remaining British regiment. They they expanded basically from Berry in the south of New South Wales up to Lismore in the north. They trained more and more with Lancers. Their Lancers expanded into those elements that were light horse. That was up until 1893. And in 1893, they sent a group across to compete in the tournaments in the UK. And interestingly enough, we've got in our museum, we've got a number of pieces of items of memorabilia from that point, including a tassel that was stolen from Queen Victoria's coach. It's a rather interesting story. Along with all of the records of that contingent, including correspondence, a whole lot of it we've got in the museum. In 1897, in 1894, the regiment was renamed the New South Wales Lancers. And the uniforms had changed in time. Initially, they were wearing a blue uniform, following the lines of the British 5th Royal Irish Lancers, except that the badges and buttons were of silver rather than gold. And as far as the Armoured Corps can work out, that is why the whole of the Australian Armoured Corps wears silver badges, whereas if you go back to the Brit Armoured Corps, you will find them wearing silver, gold, and a mixture. The uniform originally had a pith helmet, but that soon became the slouch hat. And initially we were wearing a slouch hat, a red puggaree, and of course a black cock's plume, which if you go back into the history of the Australian units on formation in 1903, New South Wales units did not have the emu plume. They had the black cock's plume. And
can I ask when they started, when they finished up using carrying actual Lancers?
Sorry?
When did they actually finish carrying Lancers themselves, your bamboo Lancers?
The regiment still carries Lancers today.
There you go. And
as a matter of fact, I've had phone calls and emails with the regimental sergeant major over the last week or so, where we're sourcing every lance we can get and getting new pennants made. Lances and lance pennants have a habit of disappearing out the back of the Q store, I'm afraid.
Are they still called guidons, or is that a different?
No, that's a totally different thing.
Oh, okay.
That's the equivalent of infantry colours, and it is it's quite a different thing to the. It's a sacred flag.
Okay.
And that, yes, is called a guidon, but a lance was the weapon, but the guidon is the ceremonial flag.
And so I take you still have a troop of horse-mounted troopers? No?
No, we don't. No, we don't. They were only ever volunteers who did it on their own time and at their own expense. The government has never been prepared to cover the cost of a horse-mounted unit or subunit. That's the horses are a very, very expensive thing to have and to maintain. But at various times, particularly when the regiment did its centenary in 1985, we had a horse troop of volunteers. The guys who carry the lances, they carry them dismounted or with the lance sticking up through the top of their current armoured vehicles. So that's where the Lancers go today, which is what the Brit Lancers do. So anyway, back to the history. They in 1899, a squadron was sent to the United Kingdom to train. They held a camp in 1898 around Rookwood, which is now an almost full cemetery, but at that point had a lot of space in it. And the gentlemen, of course, guffawed around their beers and said, "We've done as much as we can to train some cavalry in New South Wales. We'd better get a group together and send them off to the UK to train." And so a squadron, 75 men, was sent to Aldershot in the United Kingdom to train with British cavalry. And they trained under the six Dragoon Guards. The group were there finishing their training at the time that and each individual had to pay their own way over. They had to raise £20 each, and that's equivalent in current days of a pound basically equals $1,000 if you do on a trooper's pay comparison. And so each man had to raise about £20,000 to go to the UK. One young digger who was obviously from a good family was found to have £100 in his kit bag when he was over there. They were finishing their training just as the Boer War was declared. The Boers attacked from the Orange Free State down into Kimberley and down the railway toward Colesberg, and they attacked from the across into Natal. And so the Boers did the initial war declaration attack. Our guys arrived as the first overseas troops into South Africa. Before they left for Britain, they'd cabled the New South Wales government saying, "Can we stay and fight?" And when they got to Cape Town, they were told that all those above the age of 21 could stay and fight, and most did. There were 29 who went back. They then fought in the South African War as Lancers. And they were armed with the 2.8 metre lance with a Martini Enfield carbine and a sword. They were basically the first Australian troops in Australian uniform into battle at the Battle of Belmont in November 1899. They then fought at Arundel, which is just short of Colesberg, and that's where Tom Roberts was the first Australian soldier nominated for the VC. It was not awarded. A farmhand from Singleton was not, from our opinion, was not considered worthy of having a VC. Interestingly enough, that guy, Tom Roberts, went on to become a sergeant in the New South Wales Police Force. He and his exploits as a policeman equated to the kind of thing that he did to get his VC nomination. And it was very similar to the action that Lieutenant House did the next a year or so later, in order, 18 months later, to get his VC. They then fought with French's forces, outflanking Kimberley, fought in the Battle of Paardeberg, up through until Bloemfontein, then up to Pretoria, across to, I know Ermelo was basically the end of where they got to, but they went across the top, fighting the Boers. They were withdrawn in December 1901 and 1900 and January 1901. The guys were basically withdrawn in December 1900 so that we could have some soldiers on parade in Sydney on the 1st of January with some overseas medals to be part of the formation of Australia. The regiment, like all Australian units, was converted to light horse in 1903 when the Australian Army had been formed in 1901, but they were actually created in 1903. And in 1903, they were converted to light horse. Of course, light horse being you're armed with a 303 Lee Enfield, mounted on a horse using a cavalry organisation, but the idea is to scout on your horse, but if you were to engage in combat, to dismount and fight on foot. They continued to train through until the 1914, and in 1914 we have an interesting point where it was decided not to send the existing units in Australia. And that is because they were covered by the Defence Act, which said that they fell under British command once they left Australia. And that there had been problems with that, not so much with the Lancers, but certainly if you really want to find out about that, read about the Wilmansrust incident with the 5th VMR, where an interesting situation took place with British officers over Australian troops. It was negotiated, the AIF was negotiated to the extent that they would be under Australian command up to formation level, and a special volunteer force would be formed. What happened with the regiment was that it went from 400 men, or 450 or so, down to about 30 in about a month. And that's the regiment that stayed in Australia in Parramatta.
What
happened to those other guys was they formed the 1st Light Horse AIF. And the 1st Light Horse AIF went off to fight. And they got, and at the end of the war in 1918, the battle honours of the 1st Light Horse were passed back to the New South Wales Lancers.
I was going to ask about the Lancer Barracks itself. Now, being the oldest military barracks in Australia, I just love the line on your website saying, built in 1820, and some of the soldiers there would have been fighting with Wellington against Napoleon. And I thought that was an amazing history for me of looking back at how old this place was, and the fact that the Australian Defence Force hasn't sold it off and has actually kept it as a working military base is amazing. I guess being out in Parramatta, they didn't decide they needed the property values.
Yep, the barracks date from 1820. Under Lachlan Macquarie, They're the oldest military barracks on the Australian mainland.
Sorry,
Anglesey Barracks in Hobart are older. It's funny that you should ask about the desire for local developers to get their claws on it. I have spent a couple of hours this afternoon organising a visit by the Mayor, Lord Mayor of Parramatta, to Lancer Barracks on Friday, and we know what he's about.
Yeah.
Then again,
at least it's all heritage.
We've
They
got-
can't knock it down.
well, they can't knock it down, but it's what they can do to it.
Right. Yeah, just to get onto the tank side of things,
Yeah.
I love that the regiment got Matildas in Matilda 2s in 1956. When you think that the rest of the world has moved on from having deploying Matildas, they said, right, we're going to take these ones and keep going with them. And when everybody else, I guess they were looking at getting the Centurions, which what was the go there?
Right. Well, what happened was that the regiment had Matildas during World War II.
Did they? Okay, sorry, I just saw that maybe they got rid of them in '56.
That's right. In 1956, the regiment.
John's back.
Yeah. Well, the Matildas had basically ceased to be an effective vehicle. And even an effective training vehicle. Initially, they got staghounds to replace the Matildas, and gradually, within the next couple of years, by 1960, the regiment, the training regime for Matildas was for the Centurions was in place, whereby they had four home trainer Centurions in the barracks. But all the camps were done down in Puckapunyal, and as were the most of the courses. And there was a squadron of tanks available in Puckapunyal for the two reserve tank regiments at the time, and that was 1st 15th and 8th 13th. And they would go by train down to Puckapunyal, do their full camp at Puckapunyal, and then return. The 4 tanks were used as training at Lancer Barracks, and also out at Holsworthy, where they were used for troop level exercising on weekends. In addition, as the Vietnam War progressed, that's where the infantry battalions, the Australian infantry battalions that were going to Vietnam, were exposed to tanks. They were the 1st 15th guys would go out there and do the tank familiarisation on their Centurion tanks. We have a Centurion tank that's a goer and a Matilda tank that's a goer.
I noticed there's the Matilda with the 95mm rather than
76, rather than the 34mm 2-pounder. Yeah, that's a bit sad because the turret, the hull of that vehicle of Ace was the first tank ashore at Balikpapan in the 1st of July 1945, but we could not find its turret. We found the tank down in Moss Vale. It was down in a gully and covered with all sorts of things.
Where was the place in South Australia, John?
Murrayville.
Murrayville. The tank yard at Murrayville. You might have to wander around there at some stage and see what could be found.
Yeah, well, we tried everywhere to get its turret or a turret that took the anti-tank gun, but we couldn't find one. And we had on a previous static exhibit that we had one of the howitzer tank turrets, and that's the turret we've got on. We've refurbed the turret. It's now got its Travis gear and everything. So it's the tank itself is fully operational except for the gunnery, and the gunnery being the howitzer, and also the Bisa machine gun, the one that fires the German ammunition, of course, and that's a wooden replica, and we have a replica Bisa along with some expended 7.92 millimeter, 7.92 millimeter German ammunition on exhibit in the museum.
Yeah, we're going to have fun about talking about the Bisas and why they chose them, and saying, "Oh yes, we'll be able to get lots of ammunition once we're defeating the enemy."
Well, basically, no. The reason with the Bisa was that they had the Czech design. They took it back to the UK, and they tried to chamber it for the 303. And of course, the trouble with the 303 is it is a rim cartridge, and so therefore will not take a disintegrating link bill. And what they did with the Vickers was that they had a mechanism where the round was withdrawn from a cloth belt and then chambered. And that they couldn't design that into the Bisa. And that's why they decided to run with the Bisa as it was. And the interesting thing is, yes, the war did go the right way for them. And yes, the stockpiles they had at the start of the war, they were able to.
Unfortunately for the poor fellas in the tanks, that the German ammunition didn't. They had to their links didn't work or something like that, and so they actually had to load all the links in themselves or something. I remember reading that it was an annoying process, but this gave the bow gunners something to do.
Yeah. Well, that's an interesting, because that's not one that I've heard from the guys, and I'll try and raise it with our remaining veteran. We've got one remaining veteran, a guy called Bert Castellari, and he's based in Canberra. Still very bright. He was a guy who was a youngster. He was a cub reporter before the war. Went as a war correspondent after being a trooper in the Lancers. He was the CO's commanding officer's loader during the New Guinea and the Borneo campaigns that the regiment was in. And he went as a war correspondent to the Korean War, and back in Australia, he joined the press gallery in Canberra, and he was the press secretary to a couple of Bob Hawke's ministers. So quite an interesting story. He's still alive. He is still highly articulate in those periods where he is articulate.
So, and the Lancers nowadays who've been they've been given Bushmasters.
We have. Bushmasters, and we are getting at the moment we've got Bushmasters and G-Wagons, but where the regiment will be fitted out completely with the Bushmasters, only an interim vehicle at the moment. It is the Hawkeye that is to be the regiment's vehicle, and the regiment is doing its conversion at the moment.
So Hawkeye being the 4x4 light utility vehicles.
Yeah, and it's the big advantage with the Hawkeye is the gun platform on the back, and the results that the 10th Light Horse, which is already equipped with the Hawkeye, have been achieving in their targeting with the weaponry that is placed on the back of the vehicle is quite amazing. So the regiment is very much looking forward to that. It makes it a real light armoured reconnaissance regiment, as opposed to something that's using an interim vehicle like the
Yeah,
Bushmaster.
infantry mobility vehicle. Yeah.
Mm.
With the museum and your open days, do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, we have we've got 3 Ferret Scout cars that are operational. We've got the Matilda, which is operational. We have a Centurion, which is operational, although at the moment the Cents, we've just replaced the clutch plate in the Cent, which was quite a job. You had to have a crane pull the whole engine out, then pull the gearbox out, then replace the clutch plate, and then put it all back in. It's also operational. On the open days, we within Lancer Barracks, because these are not vehicles we can take outside or take outside anymore. We were allowed to until a few years ago, but RMS have got worried about their roads. And also we used to drive it down Macquarie Street, and now Macquarie Street now has a tram line running down the centre of it. And I think people might be a bit concerned about what we might do to this highly expensive tram line. We run them backwards and forwards within Lancer Barracks. We also have a short wheelbase Land Rover with the 106mm RCL mounted, and we're able to give the youngsters who are interested a ride in that and an old Austin Champ that we've got. So the kids get to actually go in something that moves, and we've also got a full troop of Ferret Scout cars that we can run, and depending on the day, depending on where we've got to with our vehicles, we run them. At the moment,
Brenda, the Universal Carrier.
What?
Brenda, the Universal Carrier. She still going?
Oh yeah, she goes. Yeah, we run her occasionally. Yeah.
That's supposed to be street legal.
Oh, well, the trouble with any of the older tracked vehicles, whilst Brenda does have heritage registration and can be taken on the road, we're very careful about the older tracked vehicles, which of course chew up the roads. And we're lucky within Lancer Barracks, we have some very hard concrete hard standing that's been put down by the Army for us, and we're able to do limited damage. We have to watch out. We allow parking on site for visitors, and we warn them very much about where not to park when we're running the Matilda. We haven't had anyone hit yet. But no, they work out, and the last Sunday of each month. We're open every Sunday, but it's on the last Sunday of each month that is run, and it's usually a very popular day. We get a lot of people coming.
I mean, it's a beautiful old building surrounded by skyscrapers in Parramatta.
Oh, yeah.
I've only seen pictures, but it looks amazing. But I understand that the building actually got relocated in the 50s.
The museum building in the 60s, in 1963-64.
Yeah.
That's but that's an 1828 building. It was down 130 Macquarie Street, opposite or where Parramatta RSL now is. It was made available by the AMP Society, who owned it. They set up all the stones and
shipped it down brick by brick in the same order and rebuilt it.
Yeah, they were numbered, and all the stones are in the right place. But internally, and the fan light, which is a window at the top of the door, that's original. Everything else is replica, and that's one of the difficulties.
Beautiful sandstone building that's in the middle of Parramatta there, yeah.
If you pull something down and you move it, a lot's going to wind up being replica. It's an amazing building, actually. You can go in there, like last Sunday, it was about 40 degrees in Parramatta. We still got a few through, but a few actually braved the heat to come out. But you go into the building itself, and it's really quite cool because of the sandstone.
and the bronze horseman out the front, which is the smallest size version of the one that's here on Anzac Parade in Canberra. I pass it pretty much every day going to work.
Well, what the story there is that John Haynes, who was the chair of the committee that put that memorial on Anzac Parade in Canberra, and that was a public raising of $4 million. The last $500,000 was actually contributed by the government, and that's because we were so close. That horse is the prototype horse. Louis Lyman, the sculptor, presented that to the committee to show what the horses would look like, and it's basically replicated in the lead horse and lead horse in the memorial. But that was presented to the committee that was raising the funds and approving the designs for the the memorial. And John Haynes, he actually paid $80,000 out of his own money to buy that for us. He'd been commissioned in 1st 15th Lancers back in the 1950s, and then spent a career in the regular army. He gave us that horse, and so that's it's a half size of the 1.5 size that's in the memorial in Canberra. Yeah.
Nice one. Well, John, thank you so much for your time and that fascinating bit of history.
I only got halfway through the history, but then again, you were stupid enough to ask me the history.
Sure. We can always get you back.
The important thing is that for anyone in Sydney, the last Sunday of the month, Lancer Barracks in Parramatta, just Google New South Wales Lancers, all your information comes up, and there will be running tanks, which, you know, is a rare thing for so many people to actually see and hear them running, and you don't really understand what they are until you see that.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right. And you don't have to, like, there is pre-book on the website, but you don't have to pre-book. You just front up with your credit card. Most people front with a credit card, and we'll take your money and let you in.
How much is admission?
The admission is just went up, $20 for an adult, but $20 for an adult, $15 for a child or senior. But we have a family entry of family of 4 gets in for $30, and any additional family member is $5. So
that's a good deal to see a running tank. Great. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Rob. You any other questions?
No.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, John. Appreciate it. And hello, folks. We're back for the second half of the show.
Please let us know if this is working okay or whether or not there's something else happening.
Brandon just said it was a great interview.
He hasn't actually said we're actually back and you can hear us and everything else is working, because who knows at this stage.
Now, look, just for self-promotion purposes, I'm just going to put the Half-Life APC's comment up. There we go. That's the sort of stuff we like to hear. Thank you, Brandon, for letting us know we're back. The Kilted Privateer checking in from Seattle, but you have to go back and watch from the start. Well, you could just join us for the second half of the show, and then when we're done, go back. Anyway, up to you, because we're about to start the second half of the show, which is quite functionally different.
Totally.
Yes. Okay. So what have we got? Oh, shall we talk about this?
I'll leave it up to you, John.
All right. It's very exciting, Rob.
It was
possibly the most exciting thing that happened. That since the last episode on the Cromwell, we have been graced with the presence of a genius, Rob, the smartest man who ever lived, and he just comments on Reddit and writes really long posts on Reddit. Sorry, Alexander Hodge has to go to bed. That's okay, mate. We will catch you another time. Anyway, back to our genius on Reddit. This dude on Reddit spent a great deal of time. It wasn't so much debunking what we said about the Cromwell as just pointing out stuff he didn't like. And that's fine. That's good. But the pedigree of this genius, Rob, he knows more about tanks than the Tank Museum's David Fletcher, and more than the chief engineer of tank design in the UK, W.A. Robotham. And compared to the genius of our critic, Dwight Eisenhower was a dolt who lacked comprehension of strategy.
Now, there was one comment in there that I really thought that I was saying. That it said saying that we probably only read one book about the Cromwell, and I'd just like to say I didn't read any books about the Cromwell, so there you go.
But you did mention Fletcher's Cromwell book, and that set him off. What I always love is I kind of run what I'm going to say up to the edge of what I think we can get away from, and then you wander in and just kick it all over the cliff.
What line? There is no line there. I'm going straight over the top of it because a little bit of beer and a bit of say, yeah, she'll be right, mate. That Australian attitude of saying she'll be right and we'll be fine.
Yeah. Now, hang on. I'm just going to put Brandon's comment up on the screen. Anyway, so the amazing thing that we were blessed to have come to the attention of such a galaxy-brained intellect, as opposed to us idiots like W.A. Robotham, David Fletcher, and Dwight Eisenhower. His killer move was defining the Covenanter as a good tank and ignoring all the other British tanks that were never accepted into service, because there were thousands of these things. But once you bury the bar for a good tank that deep under the parade ground, any tank can rumble over the top of it. Unless the T-14 Armada breaking down on the parade ground in Red Square, but all the others, that they can be considered goods. And if licking the boots of a dead billionaire fascist funder like Viscount Nuffield is what it takes him to get through the night, then good luck to him. That's important. But us little smooth brains over here will happily sit in the company of Fletcher, Robotham, and Eisenhower, just all being wrong together compared to our Reddit genius. It's very exciting. I'm just going to come back to a few facts on Cromwell, though. It had a third choice weapon. It was designed for an engine with nearly half the horsepower available, and its replacement was rushed into service just 5 months after its combat debut, which to us simpletons, lacking the genius of being a dude on Reddit, that doesn't sound like a good tank.
No, look, I'm most annoyed about there was a commenter on this story that called me out for correcting the Bren gun carrier as a universal carrier and said, and yes, you're right, I probably did say actually when he saw my T-shirt,
but it did actually say universal carrier on it, and he was asking you a question about your T-shirt.
Yeah, and I am that sort of nerd who will say actually, and that's how annoying I can be sometimes. But I take umbrage with the idea that you said I was buying a Great Northern. That's outrageous. I wouldn't be caught dead paying for a Great Northern. I'm paying for beer that I sometimes actually like, unless it's part of a podcast.
For our international audience, Great Northern is the definitive fornication in the canoe beer. It is the most watery beer designed for drinking in swamp-like parts of Queensland in the heart of cyclone season. You may as well drink vodka cruises.
I made an effort when I was living in remote parts of Australia to drink when the only beers to drink was 4X or VB. I learned sometimes you just have to drink what's available, but I'll be damned if I'm paying for Great Northern over those other two, which even Fiji bitter's better than that. All right.
I feel it's a little bit of a betrayal of confidence that you go to a bar and you order a beer and the barman starts to talk to you about your T-shirt and you try and explain what's on your T-shirt. For instance, it said universal carrier, not Bren gun carrier, as he thought it was. And for that to be quoted back on Reddit as a sign of your moral failing, I think that's a little unfair.
I've actually got no problems with that whatsoever. That's because I am that sort of person who goes, it's a universal carrier. But the outrageous part for me was that I would be he tried to remember that I was buying a Great Northern. That is what upsets me most. That was the outrageous part that I will not stand. I agree that I shouldn't have corrected him, and my faux pas was all on me, and I would love to buy the guy a beer, which is not a Great Northern, and I'll make it up to him next time I figure out which beer place it was, whether it's Capital Brewery, Brent Spoke, or to all my friends, because that's probably the three
I'm wondering
places.
if it wasn't up in Cairns where we might not have had any other options.
No, I don't think I had the t-shirts then.
Yeah, you definitely had that t-shirt.
Oh, okay, there you go.
I mean, I honestly read that comment, but was that me? Was either one? I'm like,
No,
I don't own that shirt.
I remember it happening, and I just can't remember which bar I was in because I might have had an amber ale or two. Anyway, now you've just cracked open
the Peroni Capri,
which is not our beer review, because we're actually going to go to a beer review. But okay. I guess this is our beer review now.
Oh no, we can hold off the beer review for later.
All right,
we got lots to talk about.
But anyway, for the non beer review, we had the Peroni Reds before. Now we have the Peroni Capri as a interim beer until we get to the actual beer review. And this one's, what do you think, John? The Capri.
I like
lighter style.
I like the Capri more than the red, to be honest.
There you go. It's much lighter and
I normally
fruity.
I normally like multi beers. I'm a spear carrier for multi beers, but there was just something in the Peroni Reds which didn't hit entirely for me, whereas the Peroni Capris, and it's clear glass, which is never a good sign with beer buying. In general terms, I would always advise people to not buy beer in a clear glass because the ultraviolet light will destroy the hop oils. And it gets through clear glass. It doesn't get through green or brown glass. That's why. It's not the only reason why, but it's part of the reason why beer has traditionally been produced in brown and green glass to cut out the ultraviolet.
But we're not reviewing those beers, so we have to drink those.
All right, and we'll talk about something else. What's next?
The new Nork tank.
Now,
what is a Nork tank, John?
Well, Nork is a disparaging way to describe North Koreans, which is not racially based because it's from their name North Korea. Hasten to note.
So not a northern orc.
No,
but also, as I would see it as.
Also, Norks are, of course, a lot of people's favorite parts of the female body.
Okay, yeah. So I just see the orc part of it and say, which then goes back to for the Italian side of things, is when they call it the carro armato, and they're saying it's a armed wagon. I keep thinking battle wagons. Battle wagons is what we want to call tanks.
Yes. Anyway, so yes, Norks can be a not particularly disparaging way to describe that part of the upper part of the female body. I know some young women on Twitter who send what they call Nork mail to anyone who wants pictures of their
breasts.
Their breasts.
Boobs.
Boobs. Yeah. Yes.
But we're not that sort of podcast, John.
No, we're not. So we're just calling Norks North Koreans.
North Korean tanks.
And that is just purely a play on North and Korea and has no other...
So the only other tank I've seen in North Korea is when James Bond, Timothy Dalton... No, not Timothy Dalton. Pierce Brosnan was driving around in a T-55 charging across the border.
72 in through Petersburg and
no, that was Timothy Dalton. Oh, right, this is Pierce Brosnan. And the really bad CGI one when he was escaping North Korea in a T-55.
Anyway, so the North Korean tank, let's talk briefly about it. The amazing thing is that Kim Jong-un himself fitted into it to drive it around, and that does...
And he didn't run over an 88.
No,
which the chieftain did.
Yeah,
so just go look for it when it was fun, because we had a chat with him the next day. He was not happy about things.
Yeah. Anyway, the point is Kim Jong-un is a better tank driver than the chieftain on this evidence available. You also have to suspect this tank was custom built to take the great leader coming in and out, because he is about 3 times the diameter of the average North Korean.
I mean, he's probably about a foot shorter than us, but probably our size.
Yeah, I mean, he's a big boy. He likes cheese a lot. I mean, he had gout in his 20s. He ate so much cheese.
Good on him. That's a good lifestyle.
Well, gout's no fun.
No.
But okay. Anyway, this thing.
The best new tank on the world. One of them. It's not just made of cardboard and plywood.
I would take the South Korean K2 over this tank every day of the week and double on Sundays.
I haven't actually seen anything about it besides the picture that John showed me.
One thing that I did like is apparently it has a tube for launching missiles, because the whole idea of launching the missiles down the gun barrel is a complete misapplication of a gun barrel that's designed for high pressure operations, and a rocket can come off the rail at quite low pressure. So that's just unnecessary. Anyway, so apparently, it's using the 125 smoothbore of ubiquitous Warsaw Pact Eastern build. And that's good. And it goes around.
Sorry, the 6 cassette changer. Yeah. No, nice work, okay. Alexander. Yeah, no. I get giggles.
Rob's
I get giggles.
To people in the comments that most of the audience will never see what they said.
The cassette changer. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Thank you, Alexander, for making a joke that Rob liked. Yes. Okay. Let's move on from this paper tank, although it's slightly worrying that the North Koreans are looking at South Korea and the enormous American distraction that they're distracted with Gaza that's distracting them from Ukraine. Maybe this is the moment to...
And they don't want to engage too much with the Houthis and what Iran's doing.
Yeah.
There's a lot of complications in that area.
You could, if you were a North Korean planner, being like, maybe this is the moment to roll the dice and bring the South back into our fold. I think that'd be a really bad idea. But moving on from that, we've got Bovington rescuing Ukraine with this is actually what tank museums are for, is
maintaining skills that nobody else has.
Maintaining skills and the physical record of these things. So basically, there's a bunch of British companies that want to make a tank track to send to Ukraine, and who's paying for it is an interesting dark subject that we won't begin to start to explore. But they don't know what the specs of, say, T-72 track, which I'm pretty sure is compatible with the 80 and the 64. I think it's the same track. Anyway, the point is that Bovington has the example vehicles and is sending the specs to companies in the UK, and they're telling the press about this, and then this is meant to be a wonderful thing. But Bovington is built into a lot of British institutions. It's the home of the Tank Regiment. It's been part of the British Army for testing for forever. The late Queen was frequently there for events. So it is part of the British.
And where's Charles, Where's Charles, I say?
Oh, he's killing himself with herbal teas instead of taking chemo.
Oh, that's true. Yeah. I forgot but what's the?
But if you really want to go down a rabbit hole, where's Kate? Now that's a story.
Homeopathic. Yeah, I forgot that Charles is a bit of homeopathic.
That is the story. And if he's doing that, he will live no longer than Steve Jobs, because you need proper medicine to treat cancer. Anyway, and we're not going to do the where's Kate rabbit hole because it is utterly unrelated.
I've deliberately avoided.
Yeah, but Google Thomas Kingston, find out about the Marchioness of Cholmondeley, and you will. I've always had a soft spot for the royal family because I've got multiple generations of family that have served the crown, and at the same time, you find out what they're all up to, and it's like, oh, they're just terrible. Why are we paying for this?
And that's the point. Why are we paying for it? That's the important point there. All right.
Yeah.
Let them do all the other stuff, but why are we paying for it? All right. Abrams blown up.
4 of them.
4 of them.
Yep.
So this makes the Ariete the only modern Western MBT that has never been made combat ineffective due to enemy action.
It's the best.
The Ariete is the best. Right. So my statement is clarified by the fact that Leclerc was heavily damaged in Yemen, but not destroyed. So it can't say it's the only Western MBT that hasn't been destroyed. It's the only one that hasn't been made combat ineffective due to enemy action. So whereas Leclerc was heavily damaged. So it wasn't destroyed, but so Ariete, you got runs on the board.
One on the board there. What I did love was so many people, particularly on Twitter, being just shocked. Oh my God, how could this have happened? That a direct hit from a Soviet 125mm smoothbore would destroy one of our super tanks. And it's like, if you know anything about tanks, you would know that the Soviet era, current era 125mm smoothbore is a very deadly weapon. And if it gets a hold of any tank in the world, it has a very good chance of knocking it out of action. That was never for anyone who knew what they were talking about in question. The issue is more how it's been used and how recoverable was it. And a lot of the pictures I've seen, the Abrams definitely looked immensely recoverable and didn't even look like the blowout panels had gone off, which from the
it depends which one. I saw one that the blowout panels had basically the bustle was up in flames, but and so it had gone up,
but that's their job.
But the crew had gotten out and they were fine. So that's their job, is sometimes keeping the crew alive is more important than the however many $1 million vehicle that they're in, because they know how to drive the next one. Yeah,
but in terms of shock value, it's like, well, for God's sake, they were blowing up in Syria, they were blowing up in Yemen. We've seen M1s blown up. The fact that a Russian main battle tank that got a hit with its enormous main gun managed to cook one, that this is not surprising or unpredictable. And it's a little annoying that you've got people thinking this is a big deal. But here we are. That's what we're dealing with. Now let's move on to the the Challenger. So we've got for those on the video feed, we've got pictures, a picture of an article in the Sun, and it was really funny. It was classic Sun journalism, Murdoch journalism, British red top journalism, and it was like, heroic tank is superior to all the other tanks, and the Ukrainians say this is so much better than what they've had before. And what they said was what anyone who's listened to this podcast would have told them, which is that, yes, the Challenger's main gun is extremely accurate, and it was a real step change for the Ukrainians operating it to be looking out at distances of over 2,000 meters and, saying, oh, there's an enemy vehicle, and killing it. And apparently...
On the move as well.
Yeah. But the point is that compared to their T-80s, they were saying, they will make, the T-80s more effective around the 800-meter mark versus the 2,000-meter mark. And this is nothing that is surprising to us. But what I loved in the article was when you got right down to the bottom of it, and there were numerous faults in the article that indicated the journalist writing did not know tanks very well. But
they're having fun riding around them.
Oh, they're having fun riding around.
I mean, even when they bog the tank.
Yeah. But then they get to the Ukrainians actually talking about the problems they've got, which are particularly when I went on Radio Warnet, I was saying I don't see how they can make the logistics system work. Maybe they've got a magic logistics system that is better than anyone's ever had before, but no, they've got a huge problem ordering parts from the UK and getting them to Ukraine.
Who'd have thought that logistics systems really hamper a country's ability to deploy combat systems over a vast distance?
And having a dozen orphan fleets is not something you'd ever choose.
No.
When you're just taking gear you can get from wherever, you have to deal with it, but you would not choose to do it.
Now, I did like one of the posts you put out the other day where cattails grow, tanks don't go. So
yeah. If you told me you liked it, I'd put it in the slideshow. But,
sorry. But yes, it's a case of, if there are cattails growing, that means there is boggy ground, and you don't drive a tank in there because whatever size tank it is, it's going to get bogged. And unless you have another tank that has the ability to recover the 70 or 60 or 80 ton tank that is in front of you in the mud that is stuck, you're a bit out of luck. And again, this is a skill that you need to have, is to be able to recover a tank. And it's not a case of, I'll just hook this tank up to this other tank. No, sometimes it gets more complicated than that. And as somebody who has had to recover not tanks, but trucks, big trucks, over a 300-meter distance across soft sand, and I've got photos of it, and it's freaking awesome. It was... Yeah, we negotiated with the local mine operators to get a low loader out, and then we negotiated with the local port operators to get a 600-meter rope for their ships to be able to drag our trucks out of the soft sand where we were 300 meters away from a solid piece of ground, and it worked. And so, yes, it's not, but luckily enough, I did that with a bunch of people who this is their job. Whereas if you don't have that sort of expertise and skills and capabilities, then sometimes you're going to lose a tank into your bog.
And the dark arts of warrant officers.
Yeah. There were many dark arts, and I just said, ask me no questions, and I'll tell you no lies, gents. It's okay. So I'll let the men do their jobs, and did not get in their way.
Now getting back briefly to Challenger in Ukraine, the other thing these guys talked about it at significant length was that, oh my God, this is the heaviest tank we've ever used. It can't go over bridges. It gets stuck all the time. The lack of parts is definitely hindering them, but in general, the fact that, as we predicted, as we said, it is a porky damn tank. It is incredibly heavy, and that is a problem everywhere it goes. Unless you're fighting, what is the one place that Challenger was designed to fight? Iraq.
Seriously, not the North German planes?
No, because it was designed to sell to the Iranians.
Okay.
To invade Iraq, and then the British used it twice to invade Iraq. Challenger is an Iraq killing tank. Anyway, moving on from that, you've got the general problem of penny packeting orphan tank fleets into Ukraine, like 30 odd Abrams, 14 or so Challengers.
Yep.
This is not actually
100
helping.
Leopards, or 70 Leopards or whatever it is. But look, it really is it's a question of as the article that you sent through from, I want to say Nexus, no,
the Sun.
Okay, no, it wasn't. Basically, where do the Western powers get to as they penny packet in capabilities to Ukraine, whether it's the next rockets that go 600 kilometers rather than 150, whereby they can't take out the Kerch Bridge? Where does this penny packeting of the next capability get to? Are they limiting what they give them and say, okay, you should be able to win the war with this next one? Oh, okay, that didn't work. So you should be able to win the war with this next one. I mean, how long are they going to do that? And how many more lives are going to be lost in the idea of trying to get to the point of finding the next capability that they're willing to penny packet in that might actually make a difference? It's a real harsh thing. But I guess from the other countries' point of view, not Ukraine's, but the other countries' point of view, is that by doing that, they're minimizing their footprint and what they're actually putting into Ukraine. And you got to really say that, that's really a bit of there are lives being lost by every time they say, okay, we don't want to escalate too much, but okay, now we're giving the 500 kilometer range missiles. Does that set off the Russians? Okay, that didn't set off the Russians. Okay, so can we give them the next bigger missiles to go that 600 kilometers? Does that set off the Russians going nuclear or anything else like that? Okay, that didn't set them off. So this idea of slow escalation, while at the same time they're not providing the things that Ukraine actually needs, which is a hell of a lot more 155 artillery rounds, which the Russians are getting because that's what they're focusing on.
Well, the Russians have actually started to mobilize their economy, whereas in the West, we've still got the weapons companies saying, if you're not giving us a 10-year contract, we're not going to
give them a 10-year contract. Give everybody a stockpile of 155 rounds for 10 years. Australia can buy some. New Zealand can buy some. I'm assuming they have 155s as well. Every European power will buy some. It's just a case of the first 40% of that 10-year contract will go to Ukraine. Let capitalism do its work of beating the bloody Russians and say, yep, we're going to outproduce them because we've got the money and the will. If we don't have the money, if you can't be bothered spending the money and you don't have the will, then that's where you realize that late stage capitalism dies at the hands of dictators because they're willing to do it and you're not.
Yeah, the problem is that the only thing capitalism does is maximize profits for
For
each
the
capital
shareholders.
holder.
And who are the shareholders these days for these companies? Are there any Russian
lot of,
oligarchs
yeah,
in
a
there?
lot of Saudis and Russians.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, that's a grim thought. So Rob has spoken before the break about the Corowa swim-in, which is where lots of military vehicle collectors gather. Okay, sorry, I was confusing Corowa with Burrow. Anyway, it's on the Murray River.
But none of that. Okay, Corowa, not Cowra, which is where the breakout happened. So for those who don't know, in Australia during, I can't remember what year because I didn't actually look it up, but Corowa and Cowra, two different places. One's on the Murray, on the Victorian New South Wales border of Australia, and the other one's in central New South Wales. Corowa was where there was a large prisoner of war camp during the Second World War. Cowra was where a large, that's why I'm getting confused because it's very difficult to say the two. There was a large prisoner of war camp. Now, there was a breakout from that prisoner of war camp during the Second World War, and a number of Japanese prisoners broke out and decided to commit suicide by laying down on the train tracks and letting the trains run over them. So it was a pretty horrible thing. But it's part of Australian history as a case of, that was what happened then. And there was a lot of Italian prisoners there as well. A lot of them got sent out to work on the local farms. And
there's a lot of kids with Italian names in that region now as a result.
Certainly are. Anyway, so I just wanted to
the man of the farm never came back from the war, and the Italian worker had his feet under the table.
Yeah, there was about 40,000 Italian prisoners of war there, but I don't know. I didn't actually look it up too much off the top of my head. So,
all right, thanks. We're over 2 hours, albeit with some interruptions in the middle. So we're going to thank you all for.
No, we're going to do the proper beer review. All right.
Shit.
We have this is the
language.
Yep. We have the Birra Moretti. Now, it's quite possible we've done this one already. I was thinking back to we might have done this for the 1340.
I don't think so. Anyway, doesn't matter.
But that doesn't matter. We'll do it again. It's a 400 ml, 4.6%. Sorry, 500 ml, 4.6%. Luigi Moretti.
Premium lager imported from Italy, Rob. That's
certainly
yes. Look, this is a fantastic lager, and I strongly recommend if you ever see one to
delicious lager.
Drink some. This is good stuff.
The Italian passion for brewing. Yep.
Now, it's one of the things that
1859, so before Italy was formed. Boys and girls.
Just in terms of brewing history, it's one of the things that I find slightly disturbing with the American wave of craft breweries, which, don't get me wrong, I've made a living for years of my life out of, and I like a lot of the beers that come out of it. But there are countries like Italy and the whole Nordic region and even Germany that have long, proud traditions, UK as well, of making very particular kinds of beers. And instead of this being a renaissance of their traditional beer brewings, what you've got is just breweries churning out beers using Cephalo 5, which is one particular type of yeast, and C-class hops, which is a particular style of hop growing. And basically, anytime you see IPA, that's pretty much what I'm talking about, creating them. And they're good beers. I like drinking them. I like making them. But to lose the centuries-old traditions of these beer brewing regions for the one global beer-making style is something I'd hate to see. And this is very much obviously this came out of German beer-making styles.
That's because the man has a hat. The little man has a green hat.
You think that makes him German?
No, but it makes him probably Northern Italy. But then again, I have no idea. So
there's a Tyrolean feel to the man.
Yeah, there is. Yeah, Tyrolean. Yeah, Tyrolean. Yeah. Oh, and shout out to El Bobo for joining us. Glad you caught us too.
Yes. Sorry, Alan Desmond says it's happening. I think that's the beer review. Good. Alexander Vlad has said if they could find a way to make a beer out of corn syrup, they would, and they have. Almost all, certainly starter homebrew is mostly dextrose based, which is corn syrup. But Yeah, beer drinkers like the malty stuff, which this is a lager, so it shouldn't be too malty. The Peroni Red that we had before had a lot of malt flavors in it that I didn't actually feel landed, which I'm annoyed about because I normally like malty flavors. But this is a
Good
really
beer.
good lager.
It's a nice lager. Yeah.
And we've drunk a lot of beer this afternoon, and this one is standing out as actually it's really good, and we like it. Okay. Oh, Rockhouse says bleh.
Not sure what about, but anyway,
that's fine. Okay.
Everybody has their own opinions, and we
Mhm.
don't all have to take them.
So obviously, having done a modern tank, we're back to World War II next episode.
Well, I'll see if the what the CDF thinks next time I get in touch with him, eh?
Well, that's the Australian Chief of Defence Force. Yeah, I mean, I'd love to get him on the show to talk about war crimes in Afghanistan.
He did at least saying, okay, we're going to strip the medals off those guys, all right? When he was Chief of Army.
No, he's done them, and he stopped them all wearing death's head masks.
Yes. So he's made an effort.
He seems like a very
he's a
ethical, sensible,
he's a
disciplined guy.
He's a pretty I want to say more straightforward and unhumorous guy. He's
Having said that, he wears the chin strap under his nose, so I don't know about that.
That's an infantry thing.
All right, okay. We are going to wind this episode up right now. We want to thank everyone who's been on the live stream, and it's been more than we've ever had before. Sorry, Tasman has just asked, can we do a Cold War tank for a change?
Well, after this, I'll go home and watch the Brumbies defeat the Highlanders.
We hope.
Yeah.
All
right, take care all. And
no, actually, we've already started the tipping comp, but thanks for everyone who's listening to this, who's joined the tipping comp. You guys are awesome. Okay, Alexander Vlad, if you have a suggestion, you have 5 seconds to make it. Go. No, okay.
All right. Thanks, all. Take care. And thanks for sticking around during all the technical issues.